Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and today we're going to be talking about the iPhone X again, as well as the iPhone SE. So if you're subscribed to me, you already know that I have the iPhone X and that I've been loving it. But I know a big question a lot of you have is what it's like compared to the iPhone SE. Both of them are great phones in their own respect, but I think the iPhone X obviously wins straight out of the gate. We all know that, but how does it compare, especially when you take price into account? So today we're going to be talking about two things. If you have an iPhone SE, we're going to be talking about whether or not you should actually upgrade to the iPhone X. If you don't have either phones, then we're going to be simply comparing the two and hopefully giving you a better idea of what you want. Which is the better value? We're going to find out right now.
The iPhone SE was released in March of 2016 and brought something to the table we hadn't seen in a few years from most smartphone manufacturers, being a smaller size. It has a pretty basic 4-inch screen that does the job and looks absolutely fine to most people, and the best thing about the size is that you're able to easily use it with one hand, especially compared to the plus-sized iPhones. The iPhone X was of course released in November of 2017 and is bringing iPhones into the future with the nearly bezel-less display. It's got a 5.8-inch OLED panel that looks miles better than the iPhone SE's display as well as any other iPhone. But with it comes a pretty big size that isn't going to appeal to everybody. It has a glass backing as opposed to the aluminum one on the SE, making the SE much more durable in most cases as the back won't shatter. With the glass backing on the iPhone X, you are getting wireless charging, which is really nice to have, as well as a design I personally prefer. However, the aluminum looks fine and it's going to be better, especially if you're someone who tends to drop their phone. The iPhone X also has fast charging, but to use that feature you'll need to buy a separate adapter from Apple, and frankly I'm too cheap to buy a separate adapter, so yeah. With that crazy screen, of course, comes the lack of home button, which some will like and some will hate. Gestures feel awesome and natural, in my opinion, but I totally get the appeal of a home button, and it really comes down to personal preference. If you're unsure if you'd like gestures, maybe go to your local Apple store and try out the iPhone X and see what you think. And of course, without the home button, Apple needed an alternative to Touch ID, and here it comes in the form of Face ID. Face ID is really cool, but it's still in its infancy and is probably less consistent and less convenient than Touch ID. However, the SE does have only first generation Touch ID, which was updated with the success, and it's significantly slower than newer iPhones when unlocking. So in real use, you'll probably find similar times for unlocking your phone. Really, Touch ID is absolutely fine. I wouldn't say it's any worse, that's for sure. And so if that's what you're stuck with, there's really no reason to be unhappy. The iPhone X is water resistant, which is handy, and the iPhone SE has a headphone jack, so there's a trade-off between the two. iPhone X also has Animojis, the absolutely useless, amazing feature that I love way too much. Yep, the iPhone X has it, the SE doesn't. The iPhone X is the only phone that has it, so there's that. Battery-wise, you're going to experience better performance from the iPhone X in most situations, but I really don't think it's going to be by a margin significant enough to be a deciding factor. If you really want a phone with a great battery, the iPhone 8 Plus is probably your best bet. Camera-wise, the SE is no slouch, but the X easily takes the win. The SE has a 12-megapixel rear shooter with the ability to film 4K at 30 frames per second, while the X has a dual 12-megapixel camera setup that can shoot 4K 60 frames per second, which is insane by the way, and is also able to take pictures in portrait mode. The X is a lot better, but for the average consumer, the SE's camera is going to be more than acceptable and can take some amazing shots. When it comes to the front-facing camera, on the other hand, the SE is strongly lacking, with only a 1.2 megapixel sensor compared to the 7 megapixel one on the X. If you're into selfies, the X is going to be much better for you, and while the portrait mode on the selfie camera needs a lot of work, at least it has it. Specs-wise, the iPhone X is way ahead of the SE with the A11 chipset and 3GB of RAM. The phone is crazy fast and feels just buttery smooth while navigating through the UI. The SE is pretty good too, and while it doesn't match the X or the 8 or the 7, it's still pretty decent with Apple's A9 processor and 2GB of RAM. Speed-wise, it essentially matches the iPhone 6s, which is pretty decent, and so while I wouldn't expect too terribly much from it, it's definitely more than good enough for the average person. And that's kind of the idea I want to push out of this. The iPhone X is amazing, but it's almost overkill in a few ways. The iPhone SE is perfectly acceptable and is absolutely fine for most people. I don't know if there's much reason to upgrade to the iPhone X just yet. Obviously, if you do it, it'll be a much better experience, and you probably won't regret Reddit, but you're pushing out a lot of money for that to happen, and I'd say for most it won't be worth it. As for which phone you should buy if you don't have either, considering the iPhone SE is $350 straight from Apple and the iPhone 10 is $1,000, the SE is a much better value, and if you can live with the relatively old hardware, it's probably a smarter choice. The 10 is for those who want the best of the best, while the SE is more marketed towards people who just need a phone. Which category you fall under is really up to you, and I can assure you that you probably won't be disappointed with either choice. However, it is important to note that according to some rumors, the iPhone SE will be getting an update in March of 2018, so it might be wise to wait a few months before purchasing just to see what happens. These of course are just rumors, and if you want more details, feel free to watch the video I did on it, link down below. I also have done individual reviews on both of these phones, so link will be in the description below for those.
So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please like if you found this video either interesting or helpful. I really do appreciate that. Comment your thoughts down below. Is the iPhone 10 worth upgrading to? Subscribe for more content just like this. And without further ado, I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and I will see you all next time.